The Osees Intercepted Message album review. Let's chat about it. Hey friends, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning, here tonight to chat about this latest album from John Dwyer and Company, aka the Osees, or Osees, or Osees, whatever name variation they are working on these days. You know who we're talking about. They are a legendary California-based psych rock, garage rock outfit, and they've been very prolific since the early 2000s. And for many years, if you may know this about me, if you've watched the channel for a while, they were a band that meant the most to me. They were a band that I followed around like no other, and their discography I have dove through so many times, and God, so much of it is so good. I mean, their early days, the freakish horror show of the master's bedroom, the overly joyous Help, and one of my all-time favorite records in their discography, Castle Mania. These are all must listens. Now, in the early days, there were some albums that I wasn't that crazy about. Never been a big Dog Poison guy, never been a big Warm Slime guy, but John Dwyer and Company kept things prolific and let out a slew of some of their best material throughout the 2010s. Carrion Crawler to the Dream, literally my first Osees record. It holds a special place in my heart. I've always thought Putrefiers 2 was one of their most underrated projects. Never been a big Floating Coffin guy. I think it's a little overrated. I'm sorry. It's not their best material. And also, Manipulator Defeated at Last, I've always thought it was one of their most accessible and enjoyable records. But John Dwyer and the Osees, in all their prolific nature, truth be told, have a way of reinventing themselves, and they did in a big way, giving us albums like A Weird Exits, which was just this sci-fi bloodied horror masterpiece that I didn't know that I need. Orc, who kind of pulled from krautrock and this throttling, wild-eyed garage punk that was done really well. And Smoke Reverser, I personally thought, summarized what they have done over the last few years in their career to a really nice way. But it's been a weird few years, hasn't it? 2019's Face Stabber, personally, I thought the album had really interesting moments, but the shocking hour and a half time on this thing, I looked at that and I said that could be trimmed down, and it can, because there's some really odd moments that just don't need to be there. 2020's Protein Threat, my thoughts haven't really changed on it that much since my review. It's okay. Metamorphosed, I didn't even know it came out when it did. I took months to listen to the thing. And there's some cool synth ideas on there, but overall, I thought that the band needed to just, go back to basics. Now, last year we got A Foul Form from the Osees, and this was a grimy, gritty salute to the absolute most disgusting 80s hardcore you've ever heard in your entire life. This thing was obliterating, and while not perfect, I actually thought it was just a nice change of pace. Now, leading up to this new album, I don't know, I had a little a feeling in my gut that the Osees were about to just, take things in a new direction, but kind of rebrand themselves, which they do quite often. It's always kind of been with the Osees that if you don't like one album from them, it's not that shocking. Just get back on track with the next album. But you know what? This new album from them, I don't know if it's just me, and I hope that it's not, but I genuinely think this is one of the best things that they've done in years. Stunner, this album starts off with, and it is an absolutely zany start between this upbeat, very wild-eyed garage rock riff, and this thing is absolutely dripping in synths. It's not like there's anything wildly new on this track and a lot of this album, but the Osees are really, really committing to a much more synth punk sound, which is very interesting, and because of that, this album very quickly becomes the blast of fun in the Osees catalog that I did not know that they had. It's freakish, it's joyous, it's insanely catchy. These synths will really stick with you. It's a great opener. Blank Chems, on the other hand, is even more of an all-out blast. I love the freaky grooves that we get on this track, as well as John Dwyer's performance, which is one of his more commanding here. I mean, screw being on the rails. Most of these tracks just start completely off the rails. It's jittery, it's got a sort of dance punk vibe in a weird way. It definitely gets you up and moving, but it's still very Osees. It's not that far from their core sound. It's just the personalities turned up. It's super colorful. It's just the most joyous ghouls in garage rock returning to form and going completely over the top. Intercepted Message, this album's title track. This is the ticket right here. I loved this track since it dropped as a single. It excited the hell out of me. It still does. It kind of rings true with the rest of the album's sound. It's so quirky and odd and super catchy. All of that without really losing the weirdo charms of this album. Overly joyous as well, which is where I like to hear my Osees. This is scratching so many itches. It's just catchy enough. The frantic energy is intoxicating. This is what I come to an Osees album for. On the other hand, Die Laughing, this is some weird Exits sounding stuff. The ooh, ah repeated vocals on this track set up against this incredibly busy, ever-changing, very detailed background that has just all the sound effects. It's so out there, but it works. It's so effective. Like, what even is this? I haven't heard John Dwyer and company commit to the sound of an album as a whole like this in years. It's almost completely an instrumental outside of the ooh-ahs, but my ears are glued. And Unusual and Cruel is probably one of the most easy to take in and most streamlined tracks here. It's got a slick riff. The vocals on this track are, very repetitive, but they end up coming off much more methodical and hypnotic. It's a very easy track to take in. They just lock in on this groove and run with it, and by the end of this track, it's this just very broad, very synth-driven experience, and it's good. Yeah, this is the best thing they've done in years. I don't have really that much bad to report. I mean, Submerged Building is the one track on here that I just feel like they go a little too far. I mean, this album is very busy, very detailed from the word go, and this is the one track that I feel like maybe it's a little too busy. The synths and backing instrumental are so busy, as a matter of fact, they end up taking away from John Dwyer's performance, and that's not good. There's just so much better material here, trust me. Like, take for example, The Fish Needs a Bike. If you want to hear John Dwyer and company turn it up to 11 and just get as weird as they possibly can, check this out. This is a bizarre track that on paper should probably not work. It is all built around the repeated lyric of The Fish Needs a Bike, and it just piles up and piles up details, different instrumentals, different sound effects until it just fizzles out. It sounds weird on paper, and it is weird, but it's the weirdo stroke of genius that I needed. Like, give me all of this you got. This is a reminder of what John Dwyer and the Osees can do with such little material. I mean, Goon, this is just ear candy for me. This is one of the best tracks here. This is one of the most over-the-top and ridiculous John Dwyer performances you're going to hear on this album. He sounds so animated and over-the-top. That, alongside of the continuous bleeps, bloops, blips, sound effects, different wonky instrumentals until this track just burns itself out. It works. Synths, too, quite a bit of them on every track here, and it's beautiful. And for a deep cut, I'd say look no further than Chaos Heart. This has some of the zaniest and weirdest synths on this entire album, which is very much a compliment. I love them quite a bit, as well as the freakish, overly joyousness of albums of their early discography, like Castlemania and Help. It's just so unbelievably catchy. Like, if you have taken, a couple of years off from the Osees and maybe not have listened to their last few albums, get back on track pronto. Like, what even is this album? This came out 3 or 4 days ago, and I'm kind of obsessed with a lot of it. This is easily by far one of the best rock releases of the year. Sleazoid Psycho, on the other hand, practically has some post-punk vibes, along with the very over-the-top vocals that we've gotten on this entire album. This time we get dual vocals, and they are even more ridiculous. And for an album that really hasn't been on the rails since the word go, this seems to be even more of a sharp left turn. It's exciting. And because this album needed another detour, we get Always at Night, a 7-minute, synth-driven, Julie Cruz worshipping synth slow dance ballad. Totally viable. Yeah, this actually works, which is something I never thought I would say. We get a very tender, very heartfelt performance from John Dwyer, which I don't think I've ever been able to say in all the years of the Osees. It's beautiful, it's tender, and yes, it's 7 minutes long, and you can argue that this didn't need to be on this album, I hear you, but I actually think it works really well. And this album ends off with LADWP Hold, another instrumental, very synth-driven. What even is this? This literally sounds like the best track that wasn't included in Mario 64. That's where we're at. It's layers of immaculate synths, a subtle beat, this sense of overwhelming mystery. Where did this come from? Where did this album come from? I didn't know that I needed this album nearly as much as I do. I mean, I've been a fan of the Osees since I was a teenager, and I've lived throughout most of their discography. I've loved a lot of it, I've questioned some of it, but I've been off track for a while. But instantly with this album, I feel like I'm right back in their good graces. But not only that, this is one of the weirdest and most eccentric rock albums you are going to hear all year. It might not be for everybody, but for me, this is the weirdo stroke of genius that I needed right now. It's exciting, it's off the rails, it shows them trying something new and immediately succeeding with it. They sound great, it's catchy, it's off the rails, it's freaking out there, and you don't know what's going to happen from track to track, but that excites me. Yeah, screw it. I'm feeling a decent 9 on this album, but let me know what you all think down below. If you like the video, be sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know down below what you would like for me to chat about in the future. And until next time, have a great day, friends.